Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming, and Happy New Year. I'd like to welcome my many ex-colleagues. Pham, I saw you a few minutes ago. We have some visitors from the Ministry of Construction, our good friends from Hyatt, and fellow survivors. We like to do this every year in January, and I appreciate this year that we all want to get back to work by about 10 o'clock, so I'll be quick and smart. I know in previous years that people have been only too happy to hang around. However, if you do want to hang around, Rolls-Royce are opening their, I think 250,000, is it? 250,000? You can get finance from Morgan Stanley. Rolls-Royce are launching their new car next door at 9 o'clock, so we need to be a bit quicker than we have done in the past. If you put the lights down low, I can't see. We've tried very hard this year to ensure accuracy, to ensure the information is credible. We've called many of you up to make sure that the numbers, the take-up, and the pricing, and the payment terms are accurate. And if we've made any mistakes, or we've alluded to something that is not accurate, or is a misrepresentation, I will be here for 30 seconds at the end, and I'll be very, very happy to make any alterations you wish, as long as you can back it up. And before we send this PDF out to anybody, as I said, I'm very happy to make any changes if you feel we've misrepresented what you are doing. So please don't hesitate to tell me if we've got something wrong. However, I would like to thank my colleagues who are working till 6 o'clock this morning on the presentation of the material. They've given me control with my right finger today. So what a great year it was. Some memorable images. Obviously, we sat in this room. Those of you that were here in July, and if you remember that discipline and tactics beat flair and hair. We were here the day after Germany thrashed Brazil 7-1. That was probably the highlight of my year. One of the problems I have at CBRE is that all of our research staff and marketing staff are women, and only me and the IT manager over there actually follow football. So I've had to work very hard to get any football analogies into the presentation this year, so please bear with me. We have, however, got some pictures, but I did have to explain yesterday who Steven Gerrard was for over an hour, which disappointed me. We saw, probably a good thing actually, obviously in May, we had the troubles in the industrial parks. We had a new airport at the end of the year in Hanoi. Those of you that have traveled internationally or go up to Hanoi will know that. We lost our own game of football. The men's team lost their game of football last year against the important game against Malaysia. We welcomed David Beckham to Ho Chi Minh City. I think the hand that shook David Beckham is here somewhere. Where are you? It's here. I saw him a few minutes ago. Never mind. If you find him, he's there somewhere. The hand that shook David Beckham. The bottle of Johnny Walker Blue? No, it's called something, but I haven't tasted it yet. I look forward to dinner there one day. We had snow in Sapa, which settled. The selfie took a big leap with the selfie stick. And we saw for the first time again in Ho Chi Minh City lots and lots and lots and lots of traffic jams. Now, as an economist, some of you will tell me that traffic jam is good because it is a personification of oversupply and over-demand and lack of supply. Lots and lots of new cars, and the government just isn't able to pump out enough roads, bridges, tunnels and things. So we'll see more and more of that as we go through the presentation. There was lots of good news. For the first time, we saw consistently good news in the residential market. Developers were able to feel confident enough to, certainly if you look at Win Who Can, they're able to, confident enough to take lots and lots and lots and lots of old garages and turn them into real estate shops. I don't know how long they'll be there for, but certainly if you own property on Win Who Can, you've now got a ready tenant. Legislation changed, the Ministry of Construction. Thank you very much for that. It took a while to come through, and we're still not sure how it will be interpreted, but obviously we're very excited about that. We saw a bit of movement, but not much on the big trade agreements. We now have a free trade agreement with our friends from Belarus and Russia, and we're still waiting, obviously, for the EU, but I believe that that will be coming very shortly, and obviously at the end of the year, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There were winners, and there were still lots and lots of losers, so in no way can we say that the challenges are over, but they're just probably diminished, and obviously new challenges in the face of oil pricing or devaluation will be there to challenge us this year. We still obviously have issues with the NPLs, although obviously less and less do we hear about them. The government is hoping to grow out of this issue, but the reality is they're still there in the books, and those of you that are in the banking world, I'm sure, feel uncomfortable when we mention it, and we keep on mentioning it. The reality is it's still there, and it's not going to go away. Equitization, we read a lot about, but the reality was, miraculously, the number wasn't anything like what the government thought it would be, and also miraculously, those big state-owned enterprises that own some of the best sites, the best properties, best developments in the country, somehow didn't get put on the in the market, and again, I'll mention that later. We should feel proud that Vietnam is back. I think HSBC wrote a note yesterday that GDP will be up to above 6%. Obviously, we need that. Vietnam is still, sorry, Ho Chi Minh, I think, last time I checked with the big hospitals, still producing 2,000 babies a week. We need GDP. We've got 1 million graduates a year leaving colleges and universities. So if our growth isn't up there, just to even house, feed, and employ our workforce, if we don't have numbers like that. When you look across to other markets in Asia, the 6% number isn't that starting. Obviously, compared to Europe, it's wonderful. But the reality is, some of our other ASEAN competitors are up there as well, particularly the Philippines and particularly Indonesia has been having a very good run. And we may think that our market's improving and that investors are coming back to see us, but the reality is they're only coming to see us after they haven't been able to buy something in Jakarta or in Manila. So I've just seen the hand that shook David Beckham. Thanks. The banks loosened their grip on interest rates. Now if you go to a launch of a residential property, you'll find that the banker in the corner is no longer sitting in the corner, he's sitting front and center, and he's a busy man. And he's probably bringing a team with him, because even for affordable property, banks are becoming very active in home loans and mortgages. You can see Techcombank, Vietcombank, ACB, all with attractive packages. The loan-to-value rate is now about, depending on who the client is, about up to 70%. This time last year it was probably 50 to 60%, it's now 70%. And the period that banks are happy to talk about, discuss, would be anything from 15 years to 20 years. If you think back to 2007, that's a very, very big difference. There is no way that CBRE believes that this market is sustainable unless affordability improves, unless the banks and funding take a longer, more medium to long-term view. So we think this is a very important new step, and we're very, very happy to see it. Because if it's just about cash and just about speculators and investors, then this market will just blow out like the last boom did, and there'll be lots of pain. The stock market obviously was exciting, certainly for the first half of the year. I think at various times it was up by over 30%. It ended up about 8% on the year, and obviously the sell-off in the last quarter damaged the very good run that we had. However, other markets, particularly Thailand and Indonesia, and I believe the Philippines, were all up a country mile. We looked at a number of IPOs in the market, beginning to increase again. Another thing that we looked at on the dashboard, however, none of them were real estate companies. They were all FMCG or industrial companies. The big news, obviously, over the last few months, particularly the last quarter, has been the price of oil. I don't know for sure how much oil you use at Sunwire or Petexco, and I'm sure you have to keep your tanks full. And of course, it's an awful lot more comfortable filling up your oil tanks this week than it was 6 months ago. The big news, obviously, and I can see our friends certainly that pour a great deal of concrete are finding that their trucking costs have gone down enormously. So that's where we see that the premium will be in the market. This time last year, for the previous 12 big breakfasts, we've always discussed the price of gold, because the gold price was always the other asset class that many retail and residential investors were looking at. And obviously this year, the price of gold has gone nowhere. We're still at about $1,200 an ounce. Obviously, if inflation comes up again and there's a risk of devaluation, then gold will become an asset class of choice and may overtake property again. I think we're that close on the edge there, so you can see the gold price is something that we continue to track. When we look at other markets, particularly across the region, again, we can feel good about that, whether it's when we talk to, when CBRE asks their key clients around the world, and you can see this is for both by property and by country, for investors and for developers. Vietnam is back on the list. 2 years ago, we would not have showed you this slide. We were way off the chart, we were toxic. The reality is, for both developers and certain investors, Vietnam is now back on the radar screen. We should embrace it, but understand there are other players in the room, particularly Indonesia, particularly the Philippines. Singapore and Hong Kong are going through a bad period, and this obviously is to our advantage. However, it won't last for long. It never does. We saw a lot of the stalled buildings, the buildings that have basically stopped for various reasons, starting again. We got our interns to cover this market just in the last quarter, and in Ho Chi Minh City in December we counted 37 stalled buildings. That's probably down from 60 this time last year, and 18 in Hanoi. And either our interns aren't as sharp in Hanoi. I thought the number in Hanoi would be greater, not less. However, it was good to see the projects that had stopped are now back on track again. I always quote the BCI numbers because they're very consistent. My colleagues hate me for using other people's numbers, but you can see consistency here. Still a lot of construction. A lot of the buildings, both in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh, certainly the office sector, are being used for owner occupation. There is still obviously some speculative investment in the market, but I would say the large majority of those office buildings, 105 office buildings, I thought at least 50% are for their own use. You can see also, we mustn't just live in our own little bubble of Ho Chi Minh City, and I'll talk later about second, third, and fourth tier cities, but the reality is, if you have a good idea to build, if you have a good tenant to put into a building, it's also happening in Da Nang, but it's also happening in many other cities, Vinh, Ha Long Bay, or Ha Long and Canton as well. As I said, the free trade agreements make a huge impact, not so much on us as developers and funds, but for the manufacturing. And don't forget, the reason why there has been so much investment in Vietnam over the last 25 years is because of the manufacturers. And I think that sometimes we forget that at our peril. So these free trade agreements, although they take an awfully long time to come through, are extremely important. And they may not interest you. They're very, very big, very, very thick documents. They take an awful long time to negotiate. But the reality is these agreements are extremely important for manufacturers and for industrial companies that are thinking about coming to Vietnam or investing further in Vietnam. The change in rules regarding foreign ownership were interesting. They've come quite late. There was a lot of expectation that they would come earlier, and of course also they won't come into effect until the middle of this year. The reality is that for some people it will give them a greater level of comfort. For other people that have been living here for a while and have bought, it will give them, they'll say, well, I bought because the market was cheap. Again, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. Are you buying because you can buy, or are you buying because the market was offering good value? Some of my friends sitting around the table have heard me discuss this after 4 glasses of wine and and 4 bottles of wine, but my thought is you buy in the market because it's cheap and it's good value. The rest will sort itself out later. However, I don't always win that argument. But the good thing is that now, for those of us that are either married to Vietnamese or living here and working here, hopefully it will mean that you feel more comfortable to invest in the market. But some people will never be happy. Never mind. Another thing, and I think of equal importance, if not greater importance, certainly to CBRE and its clients, is that the changes in what investors in the office market can do. And as a result, I think that I hope some of our clients from the big insurance companies will now view Vietnam as a market where they can buy and either occupy office buildings. So I think for the insurance companies and some of the big institutional investors, Vietnam, which previously has not been on their radar screen, will suddenly become a market that they can look at, especially when we talk about yields in a minute. But the ability to buy and what we used to call sublet, and the change in the rules here are very, very important. So again, as I said, from CBRE's perspective, this change is as important as the residential change in the rules and regulations about foreign ownership. Also, the broadening and the deepening of asset classes that people can now buy into, again, I think is exciting. Before it was either whole buildings as a developer, now strata title. Some of these are properly designed and built as strata title assets. Others are developers are selling off floors at the podium. But again, in Hong Kong and Singapore, other markets around Asia, strata title floor, many small companies much prefer to own the floor that they're occupying instead of being a tenant. They like to control, they like to own commercial property in the same way that they may have a portfolio of residential property. Certainly office property is a well-known asset class which I think has been overlooked by many developers. Also, it means that you can sell office off the plan in the same way you sell residential. And in many cases the yield is a little bit higher, and of course the covenant is stronger. So again, I urge you to keep looking at this opportunity, both as an investor and for those of you that are developers as well. Obviously, the deed of mutual covenant and the rules regarding the management fee needs to be very tight, and so please consult a good lawyer. The retail space has been very interesting as well. I think that the change regarding the final part of the WTO, which drops in, will allow and give hopefully some more comfort to the overseas retailers who've been very active in Vietnam in the last 5 years, particularly active in the last 18 months, dominated clearly by Koreans and by Japanese companies. And we expect that to continue. We've obviously seen that the developers, or the retailers that have been successful in this market are very much aiming at the mid to the mid end of the market and not the high end. And although they've come later than groups, let's say like Parkson, they've decided to bring their products and they're developing a very good model of out-of-town big box retail with lots of parking, with a much wider range of cheaper products and items to buy, as well as a very large F&B component. We saw the infrastructure changes, although obviously at the moment it's difficult to say what they're going to look like, but everyone, well, I'm sure, will be very excited in April or May or June or July when they're finished, and we'll get our lives back to normal again. It's almost, I haven't been to San Juan for about 3 months now, and I don't like to do meetings even at the Texco because it's an awful long walk compared to what it used to be. And my first satay shop on Nodo Cay, the far end of Nodo Cay, hasn't seen me for about 6 weeks. So I look forward to crossing Win Way again very soon. Again, it's not just Win Way. A lot of it is, we mustn't forget the fact that it's all around the city. It's not just in Ho Chi Minh, it's obviously in Hanoi and Da Nang as well. We saw a lot of construction I'm sure the government and Shimizu is only doing this for me because I drive to the Australian school every morning from the manor, so I see lots and lots and lots of construction between the bridge and the BP compound. The reality is, I don't think there's an awful lot happening north of the Vista. So there's a great deal of activity from the Vista south, and obviously, if those of you that see drive past the Basson, much of the Basson, the old go-downs and warehouses, buildings have been knocked down, and they're obviously ready to break through across Tongtang. More bridges under construction, and again, this is a view from my office window from Tutim, and again, the activity there is now more cranes in Tutim than there have been at any point in the last 12 years that we've been in Mainland Point. So again, it's been a long, long time coming, but at last it's happening, and obviously you'll see more bridges, both road and pedestrian bridges over the river. Again, happening in Hanoi, we probably say that if $3 gets spent on infrastructure in Ho Chi Minh, then $8 gets spent in Hanoi, and obviously they'll be hugely proud of their new terminal and their new bridges, but again, the construction is happening around the city in Hanoi. They should have more traffic jams than we do as well. This is the stats on the new airport, the new terminal, and wow, what a long time, sorry, how overdue it was. The reality was, though, that the terminal in Hanoi was only 12 years old. I think a few corners were cut on its construction, original construction. Turn now to the residential market. For the last few years, we've been saying, yes, there has been an overhang, there's been a build-up of supply, build-up of inventory in the residential sector. Obviously, a lot of that now has been chewed through, not just because of good take-up during the sales in the second half of the year by many developers across the city and in Hanoi as well. But the reality was that the developers cleared a lot of their inventory, a lot of their stock with good pricing terms and good payment terms and interesting pricing. And many developers probably are now taking back some of those payment terms that they were offering at the end of 2013 or through 2014. You can see here a lot of projects were taken. We ring many of you up on a weekly basis or monthly basis and ask what your sales numbers were. And I appreciate your the sensitivity to these issues, but we're generally comfortable with a number of about 60% take-up. So of the stock that was released, that's not the total stock of the development, but the stock that was released in that period, then we believe the numbers are certainly giving an awful lot of pleasure to not a wide number of developers, but certainly the developers that are active in the market. I don't think it's fair to say that every project is selling out, but certainly the key projects that we follow, and you can see the ones here that we're talking about. So it's across the board. Sorry, it seems to be more sustainable. And as I said, a lot of it is because of funding. These are some of the supply numbers of launches. So these are the launches that we've been tracking. You can see here. If you bear in mind that Bangkok, in the last 2010 to 2014, their supply numbers are up at about 56 to 60,000 units a year. In Singapore, an average year would be about 15,000 a year, although the last years are down to about 8,000. So you can see that we're gradually getting back to the sort of numbers that make it interesting to be a residential developer in Vietnam. You can also see that the numbers in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh were the same. We certainly think that the Ho Chi Minh market was a little bit ahead of the Hanoi market, but from our numbers here it seems to be about the same in terms of new supply. And again, this is what we think the take-up numbers are. So obviously this is much of the stock that was put onto the market, and a lot of the stock that was overhanging from 2011, 12 and 13 was bought as well. So not surprisingly, the bankers are a little bit more excited, and the developers are obviously getting a hold of their architects, designers, and I hope looking at new concepts. I think that everybody is looking at smaller units. I think this has really taken a very long time to happen. and I hope those of you in the residential sector just take a step back and before you put anything on the market, if the average size of your unit starts with a 1, then you are very, very ambitious. Even in Singapore and in Hong Kong, the average size unit is below 75 square meters. In my one of my colleagues over there from Sydney reminded me also that even in Sydney, it's below $80 or 80 square meters per unit. So please be very careful about going back to those numbers that, not every family can afford a penthouse. If you are predicating your whole marketing plan on a penthouse, then I look forward to seeing you next year. And if I'm wrong, you can stand up here and tell me. The reality is that most developers have looked at the sizing and thought, gosh, who the hell did this? And have cut them down. You can see here in the bottom left-hand corner what Ving Group are doing on their sizing. Small is beautiful, and smaller is even more beautiful. You can see here prices. I think we may next year use a slightly more sensitive chart, numbers on the left, but you can see here that certainly in the secondary market, and I think that this is a very conservative chart, particularly for the higher end. I think that that there is now going to be a spike in the secondary market for pricing, certainly in the next 2 to 3 months, if it hasn't already happened. On Christmas Eve, I was in London and I had 22 SMS messages from brokers that were selling properties over the Christmas holiday. 22 messages in one day. I had to take my phone to Samsung yesterday because my memory was full. Not my memory, my phone's memory was full. And the young engineer laughed at me when he looked at all the messages. And he said, why didn't you delete them? And I said, well, because I passed them to my research team. He said, well, you can still delete them after you pass them. So these are the projects. Obviously, 5 years ago, there was an equal amount of Singaporeans, Malaysians, Koreans, Japanese developers active in the market. At the moment, obviously, many of them are still here, but looking to do more projects. Obviously, we've got Japanese and Koreans still here who are looking to do new projects after they've finished what they've got. But at the moment, we see a great deal more activity across the board from Vietnamese developers. So a big change there. And not surprisingly, because obviously the Vietnamese developers are more in touch with their own market. But I'm sure as I stand here in July and again next year, the big regional developers will be back again launching their own projects, and I don't think it'll be long before we see another big project from Capital Land, Keppel, and Tokyo, and the big Korean groups, GS, etc. We saw queues for the first time developing at these launches. I was lucky enough to set my alarm clock early on a couple of Saturdays, and certainly enjoyed the rush, because it was a long, long time ago, 2007, when you would see so many happy and smiling faces. Again, if you haven't been to some of these launches, do go, take a walk around the car park, see how many people come by car, how many come by motorbike, how many come by taxi. And that will give you just as good an indication of the real demand. As I said, look and see who the bankers are and go to see how active they are, because if they're sitting there on their own, then we're in for another bubble. Just I'll say that again. If the bankers are on their own, sitting quietly playing with their laptops, then we're in for another bubble. Nothing wrong with a bubble, but you know how painful it is and how long it takes to wash through the system. So retail, another active year for retailers. I am so happy at Main Point. I can turn right, and if I wanted to, I could go to Burger King, Popeye, or Dunkin' Donuts. And if Winway doesn't open soon, I will probably have to do that once. We saw the opening of the second Aeon Mall. We saw, we're excited about, obviously, Vivo City, and we're excited about some of the other retailers that came here and have set up shop. Clearly, a lot going on. Unfortunately, all these developers feel they can do this without using CBRE, so that's quite painful for my colleagues. We saw Saigon Square 3 open the other day, and obviously more opportunities, and many of them in decentralized locations. We also saw particularly Vingroup become very, very active, not just in the development, but in the acquisition. It became very active, and obviously they're looking to acquire companies with big land banks, but at the same time buying over groups that have started on the retail trail as well. I think somewhere it says, maybe in the next slide, what Vingroup is doing at the moment in 10 years is what a group like Central from Bangkok did in 50 years. That's how quick it is. I would like to know how long it took Henry C. From SM or the Ayala family, maybe 30 years in Manila to do what Vingroup are doing in 10 years effectively. So you can see, and I don't think Mr. Vung is on his own, I think other groups are trying to follow that route. But the speed of catch-up is amazing, and sometimes it's happening under our nose. We don't always see it. Again, a huge amount of investment in the specialist retailers from Lotte and CG, and obviously Aeon, making a very, very big play in many sectors of the retail market. Not just cinemas, but coffee shops, bakeries, development, as well as obviously bringing their retailers and their ideas to Vietnam. And certainly it's changing the landscape, the local landscape, much quicker than we probably anticipate. Again, Vietnam is always up there in the top 5, top 10 of markets that retailers are looking at, and I think that actually this time around, this year, we will begin to see more retailers. I think that for the last 5 years, apart from those 3 or 4 big Korean groups that I mentioned, the groups from Europe have turned a blind eye to Vietnam for various good reasons. And I think this year they'll start to open their pocketbooks and hopefully come and visit some of you, and you'll be able to put in some new retail tenants. I know that many of you, when you open a store, you want to open a retail centre, you want new tenants, and you're always going on to my colleagues to say, CBRE, please listen, we don't want tenants that are already in the market, we want new people, new ideas, new concepts, new themes. So please go to Singapore, go to Hong Kong, and find us new ideas. We can do the local stuff ourselves. Another big thing that we've seen this year is the gentrification. As I walk back to my office and go left down Harbour, all those old, where I used to, my snooker was very, very good when I got to Vietnam, but all those snooker shops and bars are gone now. And as you turn right by Nodo K and then back up by Dong Khoi, all those bars are gone. And they've all been turned into wine shops, wine bars, restaurants and things. So again, the gentrification is happening under our nose. Well, this is just for Melissa. I kept her waiting for an hour a couple of weeks ago, and I apologize, but I did promise that I would start to talk and take green issues far more seriously. CBRE, like many, many multinational companies, has a director of sustainability and green issues. And needless to say, he's never been to Vietnam. He's coming to Vietnam in February, and he was very polite over Christmas to send me a message to say that he was coming and he's going to bring one of his colleagues. And I said, yeah, sure enough, and I thought in my normal way I'd be able to back this one off. And then he said, my colleague is going to do an audit, Mark. And I said, an audit like PwC or KPMG? And he said, yes. On what? He said, on you and your office. You're going to do an audit on me and my office? He said, yes. We're going to check how green you are, how much recycling you do, how much reuse you do. Now, I've joked before that the first person in CBRE to buy a car 10 years ago was the tea lady, because she understood there was money to be made in recycling. So my good friend is coming over, Tim Shen, and I know he's going to help take Melissa out for lunch. They're going to talk all about green issues and green leases and putting pressure on you landlords that you need to start listening to what tenants want, not just a bloody good deal, but they also want green issues in the lease. They want to know what you're doing with your water, what you're doing to bring the price of power down, etc., or their price of their service charge. Okay? So they're coming after you, and Mr. Tim Shen, I'm sure, will come to see some of you, and he's going to check me and how much I banned 5 years ago, because we couldn't afford a big office anymore. I banned the use of waste paper bins, so he'll be very pleased about that one. But if you've got any more ideas, then please tell me, because I've got 3 weeks to prepare for the audit. But green leases are a big thing, and one shouldn't laugh about them, but obviously, and this issue isn't just about new buildings. And here you see some of the buildings that are being that are under construction, that are built around Asia. You can also, Tim is actually based in Taipei, and he was telling me that they're doing a retro lead type audit on Taipei 101, the 101-story building in Taipei. So don't just think that it's buildings that are new, it's also buildings that can be retroactively audited and improved and become compliant. So, and also it's not just office buildings, it's industrial, it's schools, it's hospitals, it's residential, it's civil and community buildings as well. So it's right across the board. Have I missed anything, Melissa? No, okay, yeah, I promise I'll do that. Another thing that's changing. Now, I never thought I would say this, and after this I'll wash my mouth out, but there's apparently an evolution from presence to performance. Now, presence means Christmas, but the reality is, as I'm sure many of you know, that you are going to have to trust your staff a great deal more as they work from home, as they work from decentralized offices, as they work from other locations, and they may not be sitting at their desk. I think that's an incredibly forward thought, but the reality is that it's now become the norm, and I'm having to cope with it because I like to see my staff sitting at their desks at 8:30 all the way till 6 o'clock with half an hour at lunch. But the reality is it's changing, and I think apparently I have to change as well. You probably have already worked that out, but the reality is it means a huge amount when you're designing a new office. It means a huge amount when you are building a new office. And it's a huge change, obviously, in the way that we need to think and trust our staff. And I'm getting there slowly. But the reality is that it is possible. Now, again, this is a picture at the bottom. I'm actually building, my wife is building us a new house. And I was very pleased to put this picture in, because this is an argument. The guy in the black shirt is having an argument with the guy in the red shirt, because we're using recycled bricks to build our house. And the contractor, Mr. Hung in the red shirt, is very proud of the fact that he'd knocked down 2 houses, he'd bought 2 old houses which he'd knocked down, and we're using recycled bricks. So Melissa, I must get a point for that. It's costing us a fortune to do, but you can all use these concepts in the way you work and design. I think we need to put the photographs in the other slide still. Okay, moving on to the office sector. I'm going to share with you now some thoughts from our own stats. So you may completely disagree with it, but this is our quarterly numbers regarding the inquiries that we're getting and where they're coming from and from what sector and how they've changed over the previous quarter. So for us, we're finding a big uptick in the Ho Chi Minh market, in the banking, finance and insurance sector. So this is where the growth in the office market is coming from. So these are our stats. It's not saying it's across the market, but this is our stats. And in Hanoi, it's IT companies, IT and electronics. I think you'd probably guess that. But again, you can see here, these are just over this quarter-on-quarter numbers. So a big change in the way that tenants are coming to us, and a big change in the sectors that are now becoming active in Vietnam. And if people aren't employing more staff, and if they're not building their businesses, then the office take-up will not increase. The office take-up this quarter in Ho Chi Minh City was under 15,000 square meters. Net take-up. And as we drive around the city today, you will see some buildings of 60,000 square meters coming online in the next few months. If the net take-up was still below 15,000 square meters, you can see just how long it's going to be to fill the buildings that are already up and fill the new buildings. And this is the source of where these inquiries come from by country. So you can see in Ho Chi Minh City, still dominated by foreign companies, and in Hanoi, still dominated by Vietnamese companies. Again, I think you would have guessed that. But these these are stats as of a week ago. We had a bit of fun putting this together because I can't possibly believe that the Hanoi numbers are correct, but my colleagues said, you know, Hanoi is the capital city and they will have prominence, so they believe that certainly in the Huangkim area that the rents are strengthening. I tend to think they should be to the right, maybe in Auckland, doesn't matter. And again here you can see where we think they'll be. I think they're being a little bit conservative there, but never mind. But you can see obviously what the absorption has been in other cities around in Asia. You can see just how small it's been. Companies have made do for the last probably 4 years, for the last 16 quarters. I've got quite a lot of stock coming online, as I said, some big numbers, some very big buildings, also some extremely high spec, high quality buildings coming online. Certainly this Vietcombank Tower, which was built next to our office building, the spec is very, very high. Not just the architect Palais, who designed the Twin Towers in KL, but also the spec and the quality of the construction. And you now see the lights are on. I think there it is. I think this is the wrong way around. I don't know if any of you. I think they've inverted the photograph, but it doesn't matter. That's the building there. And obviously a lot of other buildings as well, also in Hanoi. Big, complex, mixed-use buildings coming online. And it's not, again, it's across the board. It's not just big banks that are building for themselves, it's also other state-owned enterprises such as Viettel, as well as private companies such as Hyatt and SSG. Again, it's across the board. We're not just seeing an uptick in the market in Ho Chi Minh City, we're seeing it in Da Nang, we're seeing it in Ho Chi Minh, and other markets as well. Sorry, I put that in, just to go too quickly, and obviously Phu Quoc. A market that, to be honest, up until last year, we completely ignored. And the uptick and I should mention Dalat as well. I'm sure it's busier in Dalat. Some of it's being dealt by infrastructure, some of it because it was just cheap, some of it because it was to do with tourism. And the tourism market has remained relatively constant. It's obviously changed in shape. It's no longer driven by mainland tourists and maybe even Russian tourists, but it's certainly still there and probably become an important part of our growth. We, as probably many of you did as well, may have ignored that sector, but the reality is the second home market is coming back. It's not the same as it was 5 years ago, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, but for sure it's coming back. Tourism, again, you see the hotels under construction all around the city, even from Vitexco's Ritz-Carlton, which again has started work again, to many, many, many small 1- and 2-star hotels around the Bangtan market. But the reality is, it's not, some of these projects were on hold. The Meridian was on hold for a couple of years, and this year it'll be finished. You can see they're taking down the hoarding and putting up the plants, and that'll be over the next few months. Again, a lot of interest from Ho Cham, a lot of interest in Nha Trang, a lot of interest in Da Nang, and markets that we may not have visited. But the reality is, I think there's a photograph here of Da Nang. This is the number of hotels that we could photograph yesterday morning in Da Nang. An awful lot of activity, not just on the beach, but in the city as well. So the Da Nang market, if you haven't been there recently, and you haven't flown there, and you haven't sat in the waiting room and seen just from all over Southeast Asia and North Asia, just the amount of traffic that that airport now receives. Very, very, very inspiring, to be honest, that often we're so cynical about what we're sitting on, but the reality is Da Nang is booming. And also, I was there just in December, and that wonderful new People's Committee building, it's really quite an eye-catching design. So if you haven't been to the lake, please make a trip this year. On the investment side, obviously, we're seeing continued interest in Vietnam. I think, unfortunately, it's hampered by one major issue. The investors come to Vietnam, they're interested in buying, but they can't find quite what they want. They can't find the tenure, they can't find the pricing, they can't find the yield numbers, they can't find
an answer to what happens at the end of the lease. So yes, there's interest. Yes, there's probably sustainable interest. But the reality is there's very few that actually come away happy. And if they are able to get happy, it takes an awful long time to get happy. Again, you can see the number of, we use the RCA stats, the Real Capital Analytics stats, and you can see here that for all my talk, the reality is that there are transactions done. There are deals that are done, they just take an awful long time, and very often you don't get to read about them in the paper. These are some of the transactions, and anecdotally, some of these transactions took not just weeks, took months, and some of them took over a year to do for various reasons. And the point was that not all of them, I mean, almost all of them are buying the runt end of a leasehold interest, a declining leasehold interest. So very, very challenging for overseas investors to get their head around the issues. Not impossible, but just challenging. It's not what everybody comes to Vietnam for. However, deals do happen. These are some of the bigger deals, and the reality is, though, that as a foreign advisor, we don't get to see very many of them, because obviously people perceive foreign groups like CBRE as challenging in terms of transparency. We ask lots of questions, maybe too many sometimes. However, yields are exciting. 4 years ago, we would have been talking about yields above 12%. I think there are people in this room that I remember talking to Simon over there about yields of 16%, 18% 5 years ago. But now, for most cases, they're certainly sub 10. And for residential properties, you can still get 6.5% to 7% net, which again is probably twice what you get in other markets in Southeast Asia. And if you bear in mind that the price of an apartment at Estella or Vista costs less than a car in Singapore, there is hope that at some point some of those investors from the more mature markets will come to Vietnam. And if they feel that the tenure and the rules and regulations support them, then I think that we will see some investors coming from overseas at the retail level, looking at the residential market. So these are where we think the prices will go, this is where we think yields will go, this is where we think absorption will go. So much of it, though, depends on, for it to be sustainable, depends on funding at the retail level. Yes, people are sitting on money, a lot of people made money, big money on stocks, and a huge amount on gold. The reality was, though, that that's in the bank, and people will use that. However, is it sustainable, and will young people who don't have a stash of gold, or who didn't sell at the top of the last market, or didn't have stocks, how will they fund their first apartment? Not everyone has rich family, not everyone has parents that can help them. So the reality is there are companies in the room today that understand the affordable market, and they've got the price point right. But even then, to buy a $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 apartment, you still need to put down, as I said, 30%. Not every family, not every young couple has got that. The good thing is, though, that there is now funding in the market, and 70% loan to value sounds an awful lot more exciting than 50% loan to value. So funding is an important issue for us. Also, if companies aren't expanding, the office take-up will not happen. And if the office take-up doesn't increase, then rents will not increase. This time last year, I stood here and said we thought that rents would go up by 20%. We were wrong. They did go up, but they didn't go up anything like 20%. The landlords that have full buildings, there are a few of you here today, are going to sit on full occupancy for the rest of the year. Those of you that have buildings that are 2 or 3 or 4 years old and still struggling to get higher occupancy than 80% will get there. And those of you that have got new buildings to market, unless you really try very hard and offer some extremely good deals, will sit on a long struggle that may take 2 to 3 years to fill your building. Not very popular, sorry. But if Vincom and Bitexco can't fill their buildings in 2 or 3 or 4 years, even though they've got good pricing and good payment terms now, and good terms and conditions, you won't be able to fill your building either. We used to talk about location. Then we talked about relocation. Then we talked about cash. And cash was king. Now it's all about affordability. But I think I banged on about affordability enough, so I'll only say it 3 times. This market is all about affordability, affordability, affordability. Now, I haven't had a pay rise for 3 years. I'm guessing some of you haven't had a pay rise for 3 or 4 years either. So what makes you residential developers think that you can put up your prices every quarter? It ain't gonna happen. Yeah, you may be able to push it up a little bit, but I don't think you'll be able to push up the prices like they were in 2007. Just keep an eye on affordability, please. In the past, only European and American companies worried about compliance, governance, risk, due diligence. But I think it's really gone mainstream now. If you want to list your stocks, if you want to look at raising money and other capital markets, compliance and risk and governance are the first questions the PwC, KPMG, EW, Deloitte will ask you about. If you're trying to get funding from a foreign bank, they'll come in, these bankers, they'll send their compliance team and ask you loads and loads of questions. It's not just a European or American company issue anymore. It's not just multinationals that have to worry about compliance. We've seen we've seen a number of very high-profile fraud cases in the Vietnamese press and the implications of that. And I think that compliance and governance has now come mainstream. I spend at least 20% of my time on governance and compliance issues, and it affects every single part of our business. It affects our property management, our suppliers, the way I interact with my staff, the way we take on new clients. I have to know who you are, and I have to be able to assure my boss in Singapore that not that you can just pay us for any services we provide, but the source of your money. We used to think it was just relevant for Myanmar, or Laos, or Cambodia, but now it's become mainstream. And I'm sure for many of you with Vietnamese companies, it will become a big issue as well. As I said, the return of the second, but smaller, second home market. I don't think the $1 million villa on the beach will become as popular as it was. I think it'll still be popular, for sure, but I don't think it'll be the $1 million price tag. It's an awful lot more interest, I'm sure, at $250,000 than there is in $1 million. Sizing, it's all about sizing, but smaller. We talked about yields. I'm still excited by the buy-to-let market. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Some of our friends from Red are here today. We had a good session earlier in the year about marketing and branding. I think that's even more relevant than it has been at any point in the last 4 years. If you're not using new media, social media, if you're not using anything except, honestly, I laugh when people send me an SMS and it's not in English. It's not that difficult to send either English or Vietnamese. You can easily do this now. It is not difficult to customize the marketing that you're doing. And some of our other social media service providers are in the room today. I think the opportunities and the chance to be different if you're a developer has never been easier, and it's never been cheaper to get it right now. So please send me an SMS in any language, but if it was in English, I'd definitely reply and return it. And also please make use of the technology. It's so much cheaper to be doing something different. The CGI stuff, it's not expensive anymore. I think our friends from Eating Ants are here today, and they can do incredible things for a third of the price that they could do 5 years ago. Really, really good stuff. So if you haven't gotten onto this, then please make use of some of the technology that's available in Vietnamese, by Vietnamese, for Vietnamese, at Vietnamese pricing. Before, I agree, it was expensive, and to bring a branding consultant in or a marketing consultant from Australia or from Singapore, it wasn't that relevant, but now it is relevant, and even more relevant than it's been before. I think speculators are just around the corner. If they're not there already, they're all on Win You Can. And if you haven't seen them, then go to see some of the projects there. And my good friends, the high street brokers, they're definitely back. As I welcomed you earlier, fellow survivors, many of you that are still here and have been in real estate for 10 years, you have survived and you have adapted. but I still think you need to keep adapting. And you still keep surviving. We've certainly, the worst is over, for sure, but there's loads and loads of road bumps, and the headwinds are still strong. Whether they're regional headwinds, such as the issues we have with China, we had last year that overflowed, or the ruble, or indeed the oil price. There are loads of these issues, and they will come thick and fast in 2014, as they've always done. I talked about gentrification. I was hoping to show you a picture of, not just of my walk to work in the morning, but I was hoping to show you a picture of, I spent Christmas in London, and one afternoon I counted 16 Vietnamese restaurants in London. I don't think we've talked about the wonderful thing that Vietnam has to offer, and those of you that are Vietnamese will appreciate this much more than us as foreigners. But, to go to London and in one afternoon count 16 restaurants, Vietnamese restaurants, was quite extraordinary. Vietnamese has now gone mainstream. Before it was Chronicle Hats, Cu Chi. Now it's about Samsung. It's my phone. It doesn't work in any case. That's why none of you got an SMS. But now Vietnamese food's gone mainstream. Now, my sister's coming out for a month this year. My mother's coming out for 2 months. Okay. In July, we talked about HR, and I think you all completely dismissed it as being an issue. It's a huge issue. We've been through 4 years, or 5 years, 6 years of pay, and your staff very loyally have turned up for work every day. And now they're going to turn around and at TET, they're going to look you in the eye and say, do you want me? In fact, they're not even going to say it. They're not even going to say it. If you haven't got your checkbook out, they won't be there after TET. This man, they ignored him for 6 months in the summer. They assumed, of course, he grew up in Liverpool. He grew up at Anfield. And they didn't offer him a new contract. So 6 weeks into the season, he turns around and says, I'm on my bike. I'm off to LA Galaxy. So please, please, don't assume that your staff are going to be there the week after TET. Big data. Again, you've all heard about the cloud, you've all heard about big data. How is it relevant for us? Now, there's no one in the room that's actually done this, so I don't know why I'm telling you, but there are people apparently out there that go and buy apartments and they don't know what the last transaction was in the district, in the street, or in that building. Now, how crazy is that? They take it from a young 19-year-old high street broker that this is the price. They don't go and check. If you go onto any website anywhere else in the world, you can see a recent transaction within seconds. But here, we still buy, not you, but other people, still buy property in the market without checking what the last transaction was, what prices have done. And you expect, because you're, not you, because they're very clever, that the price is going to go up. Now, how crazy is that? So please, 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 when you're a developer, make sure that there's transparency, there's big data, and you're making all these things available. And if you're buying as an investor, then please check what the last price was. Don't take it for granted from a 19-year-old guy that's trying to sell you a property that's making 4%. Okay? There will be winners, and there'll be an awful lot of losers, just like the last time. Thank you, all the Koreans and the Japanese in the room, for supporting us in Vietnam for the last 3 or 4 years, particularly groups that are reinvesting, particularly the industrial and manufacturing companies, and obviously the developers as well. Because if I don't thank you, then you may not get thanked. I'm still worried about the misuse of land. I still think that the 18 golden sites that are still out there are still 18 golden sites, and we will never get our hands on them. Not we, but you. And I think that miraculously they'll all go to somebody, and we'll never read about it or hear about it until it's done. I love it when my boss, Rob Blaine, stands here and he auctions some very wonderful art at an amazing price. And some of you turn up and buy the art, some more than you should. But the reality is, you can get an incredible price with transparency. You can get an amazing price. The government could get an amazing price for some of its land if it creates a queue at the door. How clever is that? I'm sure Adam Smith wrote something like that 200 years ago. And if he didn't, Keynes done. The Vietnamese government and the local government could get an amazing price if it tendered or auctioned its property and was fully transparent about all the issues. I think I've said that for the last 13 years. Next point. R&D lasts weeks, not years. If you have a good idea, someone's going to copy it within weeks, and it's not going to last that long. However, don't stop innovating. Do not stop innovating and coming up with new ideas and fresh ideas. And if you have run short of ideas, just buy a plane ticket to Bangkok. If you haven't been there recently and see what they're doing in their show units and what they're doing on sizing and design and theming and styling, and if you haven't been to Manila recently and you haven't been to Cavite and you haven't been to Quezon City and you haven't been to Jakarta, then jump on a plane this weekend, because it's right under our nose. The Indonesians, the Malaysians, the Singaporeans, and particularly the Thais are still way ahead of us in terms of design and styling. Outsourcing. Just try it. Just try it. Yes, many of you are developers, but you're not always great at managing your own property. I think more subsectors will emerge. I think student accommodation in London, in Sydney, in New York is big business. It's huge business. Soho apartments, retirement, I'm almost ready for it. Worker accommodation, build to suit, sale and lease back, a word that's very rarely used, and REITs will all come eventually. And I think as some of you struggle to see which part of the market isn't so congested, we'll all look at some of these things. And again, there's loads and loads of good ideas around the region. You don't have to look far.